Yeah. Welcome to What's the Scenario, the podcast where we explore culture, identity, purpose, and reinvention. This show is about how people navigate change, redefine themselves across seasons of life, and find meaning in the transitions most of us eventually face. Today I'm talking with Blaine Burnett, whose journey stretches from the Bronx to the Bay Area, from education to operations leadership, from fatherhood across generations to a major reinvention chapter in Singapore, and now for another transition on the horizon. Blaine, welcome to What's the Scenario?
Thank you.
Thanks for being here today. And this is actually a round two for us. We did this before. I had some technology issues, and so we're back here in this beautiful, proper studio.
Yeah, I enjoyed it the first time, and this one is like, this is next level.
So now in the intro, we talked a little bit about just your journey and kind of how you've had this amazing experience that has spanned over the generations or over time. But how would you describe your stage in life at this point currently?
It's a little bit in flux. You know, it's after a big pause, kind of a zeitgeist type moment, like the pendulum's about to swing back in the other direction. I went from active lifestyle, working, doing everything that a dad normally does, to a support role in the trailing spouse role. And now that's kind of waning down, coming to an end, and it's getting ready to swing back in the other direction. So a bit of a change point for me.
Yeah. I always love to talk about people's beginnings because I think of life as a journey, and that each step gives you something that you take with you to the next step. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. So let's talk about your childhood. What was it like?
Pretty average childhood, middle class family, Bronx, New York, working class. My dad was a fireman. My mom was a teaching assistant in public education. So pretty regular. I mean, the only standout thing that we had, I think, that was different from some of the other people in our neighborhood would be we summered away from the Bronx. So whereas most kids in my neighborhood, their summers involve the park and the pool and Little League and that kind of stuff, my brother and our summers were away. We went up to Massachusetts for the entire summer, every summer while we were younger. So that was, I think, the only difference between how I came up and how the neighbors' kids came up. I think.
Did as you know, What's the Scenario? The title of this podcast is sort of an homage to hip hop because some of the music that I love.
Yeah, Tribe.
Yeah, A Tribe Called Quest. And I feel like a lot of us who were not from New York, we got our little bit of education about New York from listening to hip hop. And so when I heard about the Bronx, it was usually South Bronx, right? It was KRS-One.
Yep.
And those guys talking about South Bronx, South Bronx, which was a very, very different part of New York or part of the Bronx than where you grew up, which I learned from talking to you.
Right.
So what was the New Yorker experience for you as a kid? Obviously, in the summers, you said you were away. But when you were there, what was it like? What was that experience like as a New Yorker? Because every New Yorker I know is so proud of New York. They love their roots, where they're from. Did it feel like that for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, growing up, I didn't think that there was any place else but New York. It was amazing to me to talk to people who had been other places. And in my mind, it would always be like, it's not the city. Like, it's all right or whatever. Or us leaving the city would be going to Long Island, right? That we would think that's the big journey and we're getting on the train or the LIRR or whatever. So, yeah, I'm up north. My family is right up near Bronxville and Pelham and New Rochelle. So when you see the Bronx on television, it's usually, like you said, the South Bronx. It'll usually be a cut scene with a train going by and then some broken glass and some stuff that's going on in the street and cars zooming by and all that kind of stuff. I was in a kind of a middle-class neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I had mentioned before, it's kind of like Archie Bunker, except everybody was Black and Hispanic instead. So a little bit different. There's still Bronx roots in the area that I'm from, but it's definitely not the KRS-One Bronx and that kind of thing. So.
And your dad's Jamaican.
Yep.
And your mom's American.
Yeah, my mom's, she's got West Indian roots, but they're kind of erased. She was,
Okay.
she traces her stuff back to Florida, not necessarily any other place besides.
And your parents were both civil servants, basically.
Yeah. So my mom worked in a public school most of my life as a teaching assistant in a special ed program, which was actually my first job as well. And then my dad was civil servant, all of the jobs, policeman, fireman. He did a long stint in the Army like most people did when he got out of high school. And then he ended up as a fireman, and that was what he did for most of his career from beginning to end, was a firefighter.
Do you think there are things about Caribbean heritage or Jamaican heritage in particular that made its way into your parenting? The parenting that you received, I mean.
Probably, but my dad was a bit estranged from his parents. So the cultural things that probably would have gone on, were they still a cohesive group, we kind of missed out on that, my brother and I. So we were more attuned to my mother's family than we were my dad's family.
Okay.
But for sure, the strictness, some of the negative sides of it. My dad was, I'm not going to, by today's standards, certainly racist, but by those days' standards, he was a, stay with your own people kind of guy. I think that is maybe a Caribbean trait. But yeah, so we didn't get the whole flavor of it because, again, my dad was estranged from his parents, but I think some of that probably leaked into his parenting.
Got it. And I want to talk about that a little more, about identity and the Caribbean heritage, blackness, what it means to you in a little bit. But let's talk a little bit more about upbringing. So you grew up in New York, North Bronx, I guess you could say, if that's a thing, the northern part of the Bronx.
Baychester is what people would probably say. Baychester
okay.
area of the Bronx.
Okay. And do you look fondly on your childhood? Like, was it?
I do. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It was, great times for me. I'm sure there were, how something is great to you, and then when you describe it to somebody else, they're like, what?
Yeah.
No, that's not how that's supposed to go. But for me, it was great.
When you see kids' childhoods today, you and I talk about parenting a lot outside of this, and we're both dads. Do you think there's things that, do you think kids today are missing out on certain things that you had in your childhood that you kind of wish they could have?
I go back and forth on that. Sometimes I think, if you had this, or if you did it like we did it when we were younger, you would have a whole different appreciation for stuff. But there is, in this age, such a tremendous amount of knowledge and information that is available to kids that they can't be naive. And I think that is what we had when we were, you put a box out in the middle of the street and you put a board over it and you run your bike and jump over it because you don't know that if you crash on the other side and you break your L4 and, this kind of, today's kids know that. Or, you sit in a car and you hang out the window because you've never seen a video of a kid hanging out the window and getting hit by a car going in the other direction. So there was kind of I think it was more adventurous when we were younger, and there was more of a sense of discovery. And now I don't think there's really anything to discover. You can experience it for yourself, but you've already seen it somewhere online. You've already seen it on Instagram. You've already seen it. So, and then you also wind up, I think, going down a road as a kid where that's what you're interested in and that's what you're trying to emulate and that's what you're trying to do. There were no viral dances when I was a kid, so I wasn't trying to do.
How would it go viral?
Right, exactly. I wasn't flipping bottles and stuff like that. We played Scullies and cap games and sewer-to-sewer football and all of that kind of stuff because that's what our friends were doing around us. So we weren't thinking about something that was going on in another part of the world and trying to do that or trying to emulate that. I don't think it's bad, though. I just think it's different. I think kids have a different upbringing now.
What's sewer and sewer football?
Sewer-to-sewer football. So in the city, so there's not a whole bunch of grassy areas, so you play football on the concrete in the middle of the street. So you have one sewer that's the end zone, you have one sewer that's the 50-yard line, and you have one sewer that's the other end zone. Oh. And then first down, you can't measure it or whatever, so it's by completion. So some people do 2, some people do 3 completions as a first down or whatever. So you're just playing, bouncing off of cars and stuff like that. And you have one kid on the side that tells you when cars are coming so you can get out of the way.
As you're talking about this, a piece of me does feel kind of sad that our kids will never have that, like that same sense of when you say discovery, kids now have access to more information than ever. So really, they should be able to discover anything and everything nonstop all day, every day, right? Just with the phone in their pockets. But I think there is something really beautiful about being naive and taking risks because you're naive and saying like, oh, I'll never forget when we walked on the ice and we thought it was thick enough to hold us,
and
but
we
then
fell through.
And we fell
Fire
through.
Department had to come.
Yeah, and like we were freezing, and then parents yelled at you, and they were so mad, but they also were so scared for us, and it reminded me of how much my parents loved me. These types of experiences, I hope there will be a return to some of it to the degree possible. I worry that phones and social media are robbing adults too,
Absolutely.
but children of their sense of discovery, because they're less likely to do anything but look at their phones. That's something that I'm steeped in right now, is thinking about how to navigate my kids in a way that they have some kind of balance, healthy balance.
It's like a drug, man. I mean, what do they call that? Nomophobia, where, every 5 minutes you're thinking about your phone and looking at something because you feel like you missed something.
That's
and
addiction.
What you're doing is you're missing the rest of the world while you're looking at your phone, and you're also getting a stream of information. My wife and I were just discussing this morning on an unrelated topic. You're also getting a stream of information that's untrue. And that was part of what discovery was about when we were kids. When you figured something out, it was true. It was testable. It was repeatable. Here, you find something out, you got the information secondhand, you don't really know where it came from. And you're going to find out 2 weeks later that doesn't really work, or this is not really true, or that's not how things operate. And it's it's not a childhood the childhood that my son had and the childhood that my daughter is definitely going through now. I don't envy them for it. I wouldn't trade mine for it, but I also don't necessarily feel sorry for them, because their path is just going to be different. And I'll tell you how I got to that, because I didn't always think that. How I got to it was the when I was a kid stories that I got from my parents. And I think about it in terms of my kids looking at me like I looked at my mom and dad. And my mom and dad would constantly tell us about different stuff that they used to do when they were younger. Oh, you never played stick and hoop, where you get a hoop and you hit it with a stick and go down the street, and you never did this and you never did that. And I remember as a kid thinking, yeah, that sucked. Your life was, that's not great. And I can imagine my kids saying, oh, so just like we were talking about sewer football, oh, so no park, huh? You just, you stood out in the street and threw a football back and forth, and you had to get out of the way of cars, huh? And, that was great for you. Like my kids probably look at me like I looked at my parents, even though I think that I'm different. I'm probably not.
Something, as we're talking about this, I have this vision in my mind thinking about my kids. We take them to the beach quite a lot. And
here in Singapore?
No, in just around, we go to Phuket and other parts of Southeast Asia, because, and I'm starting to get a little tired of it, to be honest, because so much of our trips, we build that in. But my wife and I talk about how they're only going to get that kind of unabashed joy out of simple things like playing with sand and looking for shells and letting the water go into the little hole they dug in the sand and calling it a lake. They're only going to get that for a few more years before it's gone, right? Because they might just be interested in other things. Hopefully it's not because they're consumed by a phone. But it's so beautiful to watch. It's my biggest joy is watching them be so joyful with so little, right? They're just splashing in the water and playing in the sand. And there are times when I'm like, can we go do something historical? Can we go check out this town and all these things? But when I reflect, the best joy, the greatest joy that I have in my parenting is watching them feel free and joyful with simple things. And so, I don't know. I think it's partially because when I look at my childhood, those are the things I remember. Everything you're describing could have been part of my childhood too, right? And I wonder for you, Blaine, is there any part of your childhood that like still remains with you today? Like, do you think about that?
My childhood is defined by vivid memories of relationships, not necessarily things that I did. I remember people. I remember other kids that I played with. I remember how we showed up for each other, how we even got in contact with each other. We didn't have beepers or cell phones or whatever. So you had to go ring somebody's doorbell, and there was, a set of rules that went along with that. It had to be a certain time. If you saw somebody's dad's car in the driveway, you didn't go knock on their door because you knew their dad was home and he just had a long day at work.
Right.
You had to have some chatter for their parents when they opened the door. You couldn't just say, hey, is so-and-so home? You had to say, oh, hello, Mrs.,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. How are you today? Oh, yeah, my mom, she's doing great. And then you get to the meat of it. I remember the art of being a kid when I was a kid. I remember the rules of it. I remember the process of it. And most importantly, I remember the relationships with individuals.
Are you in touch with any of them?
There's quite a few people that I'm still friends with from when I was really younger, but mostly, I've got one friend who's probably my best friend that, we started hanging out when we were in middle school. I've got one friend from high school. And this is not that I'm not still in contact with them, because Facebook, you're in contact with everybody, right? But I have a very small number of actual friends. So, yeah, I'm in contact with a whole bunch of people that I went to high school with, but they're not friends, right? There's one guy that I'm in contact with from high school that's an actual friend of mine. So, yeah, still in contact with him. But interestingly enough, some of the memories are not memories with great friends. Like most of my memories from the kid I have with the one guy that I'm talking about. Like if I start a sentence about something that we did when we were younger, he's going to be like, oh my God, you remember that and this and that. So yeah, but those intense memories that make me nostalgic about childhood can be with one-offs. They don't necessarily have to be with my best friend. It's just, I remember doing this with so-and-so. So it's not the this that matters. It's the me and this guy did this, or me and this girl did this, that kind of thing. So that's what my memories are. And then my most intense memories are from the summer, not necessarily from normal life during the winter when I was going to school and doing the rest of the stuff. So.
And these were the summers you spent in Massachusetts?
Yeah, in Massachusetts. We spent the entire summer there.
So I want to ask you, earlier you mentioned that the part of New York where you were living, where you grew up, was very middle class, lots of civil servants, firefighters, police officers, things like that, teachers. And you also mentioned I think you said it was like Archie Bunker, except for all Black and Hispanic.
Oh yeah,
right. And Archie Bunker is going to be a reference that some people listening to this will have no clue. So I
meant it as far as the segmentation of the place, not necessarily. Archie Bunker is a classic racist. It's a character from a 70s show, and just for your listeners that don't know, and it was very popular when I was a kid. But I meant more of the segregation is kind of a hard word, but the boundaries of the neighborhoods, the different ethnicities of people that were around, and kind of the makeup with it, what the houses look like and what the buildings look like, what the neighborhood looked like.
So you grew up in a mostly Black and Hispanic neighborhood. Would you say that?
Mostly wouldn't be a description of it. All. Yeah.
So what was that like? Like, I guess what I'm interested in is your viewpoint on Blackness. It's a big question, but I ask it because I think it's really, really important. It can be a big driver of people's worldview. Absolutely. So tell me about, I guess the way to ask the question is, what is your relationship with Blackness?
So now I think it's different because there's a whole bunch of definitions in it, and there's a whole bunch of backstory in it, and there's now a whole bunch of experience with other cultures and other ethnicities. But back then, when I was a kid, there wasn't anything different. So it wasn't something that I thought about. Everybody on my block was Black, except for one Spanish family that lived in the middle of our block. And so New York is blocks. It's areas and then it's blocks. You play with the kids on your block, you hang out with the kids on your block. You might not even know the kids that are on the next block. So my block was Black. Mostly Jamaican, West Indian, Caribbean, and there was one Spanish family on the block that was right in the middle of the block. So the idea of Blackness, you might have got it from a uncle that was into dashikis and had been somewhere and seen some African culture thing or something like that. But it wasn't strictly an identity until you got somewhere where there were other people. So as a kid, those were just the people that I was around. There wasn't anybody different from that.
Right.
And those are the people that I want other places with for safety reasons or for kind of groupthink reasons. Like we all thought the same, we all did the same kinds of things, we all liked the same kinds of things. And, you go 4 or 5 blocks over in the Bronx and you get into a different neighborhood where you're not necessarily welcome. So blackness then was that's the group that I belong to, that's the group that I stay in, that's how I stay safe when I go somewhere else.
So so that was a thing where you could go into a different neighborhood where you didn't feel safe?
Absolutely, but not in the 2026 version of safe. People weren't getting shot all the time when I was a kid, but yeah, you walk by yourself or you're not in a group that's not there's not enough people in it, and you walk over into go over to Allison Avenue, which is mostly Irish, or get a little bit further down, which is mostly Italian. They're gonna let you know that you're not supposed to be in that neighborhood, so you can run into. But it's not the nowadays where you think you're gonna go somewhere and get shot, or you're gonna go somewhere and something bad is gonna happen. Right. You're gonna get into a fight, and the cops are gonna show up eventually. Nobody's trying to kill you.
And how tall are you?
I'm 6'4".
And were you 6'4" like in high school?
I've been 6'4" since the 3rd grade. I mean, I was a big kid, but
so you were an imposing guy. I don't think too.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
that helps.
Childhood, I think, is a little bit different though, because we walked around in large groups, and when you went somewhere, so that's maybe it's a quintessential New York thing. I don't know, but you weren't just hanging out outside with one guy.
Okay,
it'd be 10 of you. You know what I mean? Because you needed guys for football, you needed guys for basketball, you needed guys for killer carry or whatever.
But if the other guys were scared, they were going to hide behind you.
Yeah,
you're the 6'4" high schooler.
I don't want to paint the wrong picture of the Bronx, but there weren't too many guys that were scared of me.
I like that.
So it was. And when you go to the other neighborhoods as well, like maybe as a youngster, I'd have been like, oh, they're all punks over there, whatever. Yeah. But you go over to Allerton Avenue and you get involved with some of those Irish dudes, and you were going to get it.
Yeah.
If you go. Yeah. Down to different parts of the Bronx, and you were in an Italian neighborhood, it wasn't enough of you. You were going to get it. And it was, why waste your time doing all that, right? So everything that we needed and wanted was in our neighborhood.
Right.
So why go there unless we're going somewhere like to a different party or something like that? So yeah, just a little different.
When you went to Massachusetts over the summer, what was the environment like?
So my parents had a place, and we have a place now on Martha's Vineyard, which is kind of back then it was, I don't want to say elitist, but it was an upper crust black refuge vacation spot. There were 2. One was Sag Harbor, which is a little bit closer to New York. It's out on Long Island. And the other one was Martha's Vineyard. So that was a different kind of individual than I spent time with during the winter when I was going to school.
Right.
These were, my friends back home were the sons of, firemen and policemen and school teachers. My friends on the vineyard were sons and daughters of doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs, that kind of thing. So it was a different class of people. So there was quite a bit of code switching that went on for my brother, myself. And in addition to that, my mom also took most of my relatives' children as well. Like my uncles and aunts' kids came up. So even though it was only a 3-bedroom house that we had up there, we would have 9, 10 kids up there at some time. So it was almost like a little bit of a summer camp. So completely different experience. I mean, you couldn't compare the kids, you couldn't compare the environment. You're on the vineyard, you can leave your door open, you can leave your keys in your car. One of the things that I experienced that I don't think that a lot of my fellow Bronxites growing up might have experienced is having the ability, sort of like this is something that we experience in Singapore, and you and I talk about this all the time. My mom on the vineyard could let us all go out and not have a care about it because there was nothing that was going to, first of all, it's an island, it's real small, where are you going to go?
Right.
But there was no worry about what was going to happen to the kids when they were out there. And we took tennis lessons and horseback riding lessons and, just stuff that wasn't available to me when I was in the city. So completely different experience.
Well, I wonder if parents today going to the same exact town in Martha's Vineyard would still say that. And the reason I pose that question is because I think parents today are more protective than they need to be. I don't know that it's necessarily any more dangerous. It's just that we have more information. So
it's out there.
Yeah, you know what's out there, and you take fewer risks with your kids and yourselves and so forth. But that's probably not something we're going to solve here today. But
and it's also over-exaggerated. We had a conversation at the club the other day, you and I, where we were talking about how, when we were younger, they had the Atlanta child murders. They had kidnappings. They had all kinds of stuff. But it wasn't highlighted like it is now. Right. So you didn't think it was happening all the time, everywhere. I talked to my wife yesterday with the same conversation I was talking about before. If you listen to social media, you would think that every kid's getting kidnapped. You would think that ICE agents are all over the United States and they're taking every single brown person or every single person that's not, doesn't fit their description of American, and they're locking them up and they're moving them different places. And it's just not true. And that doesn't mean that it's not bad, but it's not to the extent that it's being portrayed as. And I think we internalize that as adults. And then we put these bubble wraps around our kids, these hedges of protection around our kids that aren't necessary. And it keeps them from having those naive, authentic experiences that we had when we were younger because we're worried about what's going to happen to them. And in all likelihood, it's not. You and I have no reason to be worried about our kids, almost anything happening to them in Singapore. But there's still people in Singapore who don't let their kids do this, and they don't let their kids do that. They don't let their kids go here, and they don't want them to do, oh my God, there's so much evil out there in the world. There might be, but it's not here where we are. And it's not, even the few things that do happen, it's not to the extent that we think it is. So we're talking ourselves into being overprotective of our kids, me included. It's not like I figured it out or anything like that, but I at least recognize, that didn't really happen, or that's not going to happen, or there's not that's not likely. And then you go back to the States as opposed to Singapore. Here, what's there, 5 million, maybe 6.5 million people here? You go back to the States, there's 345 million people. It is horrible anytime somebody gets killed. But if somebody gets killed likely? Or somebody gets kidnapped, that's 1 in 345 million, or 10 in 345 million, or 100 in 345 million. Still horrible, but the world isn't as awful as social media would have you think it is.
So speaking of parenting, you have a Jamaican dad who...
Well, he's passed.
He unfortunately passed. But what are some lessons that came down from him in particular to you when he was...
My dad, and we've had this conversation before too, my dad didn't teach anything by saying stuff. It was the manner in which he did things that I think stuck with me more and longer than anything else. Not showing up late to places, not cursing around women, keeping your hands off kids. You don't beat kids just because they did something. That's actually kind of probably not something that he got from his family, because he used to tell me about when he was younger, and they used to beat him up and down the stairs. But the way in which he showed up and conducted himself when he got there, especially given his upbringing and his background and his status, so to speak, was what sticks with me more. And I learned more from what he does than what he said. Like, I remember things that my dad tried to teach me that didn't stick. But what he showed me by what he did every day, that stuff stuck. But I mean, there were the lessons about when when I got older, when you get pulled over by the cops, if you're doing something like that, how to conduct yourself so you don't get yourself into some serious trouble and that kind of stuff. So those were verbal lessons. He gave those. But
well, he taught you some financial lessons as well, right?
By actions, right? The home ownership, investing, things like trusts, are lessons that, and I can't really tell you where he got them from, because this wasn't something that his parents were into. Well, in the West Indies, land ownership is huge because there's not a lot of land there. So if you own land, it's a big deal. But some of the stuff that my dad had, some of the information that he had, he shouldn't have, from just looking at him, a middle class and probably lower middle class, but middle class. I mean, he had a summer house, so he maybe middle class, high school educated, civil servant. You don't get investment strategies out of that. You don't get home ownership and refinancing mortgages and stuff like that from there. So he got it from somewhere, and he definitely passed that on.
Don't you think this is cool? How the thing that immediately jumped into my mind was some people say, well, my dad taught me this, now I'm teaching you this, to their kids, right? But all it takes is any given parent to say, I'm going to learn some new things. I'm going to take on some new traits, right? And maybe shed some bad traits as a parent. So I wanted to ask you, as a parent, right? You're a father like me, and your kids are a little older than mine, and so you've kind of done what I've done already. What approach did you take to parenting that you thought of before you had kids, and then maybe ones that you learned do or don't work once you had them? Yeah,
so this is one of our oldest conversations, right? Yeah. And so first, what we talked about before, the intention is always not to hurt my kids. I always want my kids to be better from interacting with me and the things that I do every day. I don't want to hurt them. So it is a constant effort to remove the things from my personality that I experienced when I was younger, benign or serious, trying to remove those things so that I don't impart those things on my kid. I recognize shortcomings in my personality and the way that I go about doing things, and I don't want to pass those on to my kids. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is to make them better, started them off in a better situation, and then making their road not necessarily just easier, but a little bit of ease and a little bit of definition so that they get more than what I got when I was younger. I think my parents did a great job, and I've told you that before. But there were definitely some missteps when I was younger. I try to eliminate those. I don't want to pass those on. So the positive generational stuff I want to pass on to my kids. The negative stuff I want to kind of get rid of. I don't know that I thought about that before I actually became a parent. I don't know that I ever sat down with myself and thought, well, this is what I'm going to do when I'm a kid. What I know I did not have as thoughts, and this is something that is uncommon, is I didn't have, well, I'm never doing that to my son when my dad was doing something or when my mom was doing something. I don't know why it never came up, but it just never came up for me. Maybe I wasn't thinking about having kids. I don't know. Yeah. But that part I never had. And that's a rarity in people that I talk to. People are always like, well, I remember when I was going through this, and that, and I thought to myself, I would never do that to my kids. I didn't have that. I was like, yeah, my dad did all right. My mom did all right. So if I just give my kids what my parents gave me, they're going to be cool. Right. But if I could do better, eliminate the things that they did that were hurtful, intentionally or unintentionally, and then do better, put my kids in a better situation.
Do you consider yourself an optimist?
No, I'm an extreme pessimist, but I married an optimist, so it evens it out. And there's a lot of stuff in my marriage that is just, it services that. It serves that point. Yeah. So I am a glass half empty and about to be empty and about to be knocked over. I am worst case scenario. The other day, I was at the club and we were talking about investing and this real estate thing that I'm trying to do and how we were training AI, how I was training AI to give me the worst case scenario for investment strategies in this real estate thing. I want the worst case because that's what's going to happen. And in my mind, if I plan for what's worse and I think that that's the best that it's going to be, even if it's just a little bit better, it's great. Right?
So were you like that as a kid? Or like a high schooler, let's say?
I don't know. I think I was a very sarcastic kid. I don't necessarily know if it waxed as negatively as it seems to as an adult.
I'm just wondering if you're jaded by life. if life taught you to be pessimistic or
I don't look back on any experience that would have resulted in that though, right? So
just natural disposition.
Yeah, it's just a natural disposition. Yeah. And again, that's one of the things that was handed down by my dad, right? It was nothing that was done in my house was worth hooping and hollering about, even the stuff that was. My dad was a very even-keeled. He was either even-keeled or he was negative. There was no clapping. There was no back pats. There was none of that stuff. It was either stuff is just okay, but be ready. It's going to get bad, or it's trending down already, and we need to prepare for that.
So you even mentioned a conversation you and I had about investing and things like that, and you were talking about doing the risk analysis and thinking about worst case scenario to make sure that you factor that in. When you were in high school, you decide to go to college when you finish, and where did you go?
I went to Morehouse. Yeah.
Morehouse. And so I'm a little mad at Blaine because he said I'm going to wear my Morehouse shirt today, and I was like, that's perfect for the podcast, so we can talk about it. But he got a stain on the shirt and wasn't able to.
Yeah, it was
long story. But that hopefully the shirt he got, it was a brand new one.
Had it laid out like first day of school. I was like, I'm doing Robbie's podcast tomorrow, and I'm going to be sharp
on the internet.
I thought about throwing on a T-shirt, but I was like, I'm already showing up to my thing in shorts. I can't do that.
Well, so for anyone that doesn't know, Morehouse is a highly esteemed school that comes from the HBCU network. And so HBCUs are historically black colleges and universities. They were started as a deliberate scheme to create academic opportunities for black Americans right after Jim Crow, basically, right in the civil rights era. They were created in the mid 60s, I believe,
just about
65 or something like that. And Morehouse, I think, was one of the first ones in the
absolutely
right. And so it's got a lot of history, and there's some exceptional alums and so forth. And so let's talk about Morehouse. So you decide to what was your thought process in picking Morehouse to go?
So the college decision for me was a little bit different. That wasn't a plan in high school that I came up with.
Okay.
It was more of there was a lack of a plan, and my dad was you can go to school or you can go to work if you're going to be here. And I didn't want to go to work. Work wasn't my thing. Like, I had done a couple of summer jobs and that kind of stuff, and I was like, you know what, I'll go to school. So Morehouse actually wasn't even on my radar as far as schools were concerned. I was thinking of a SUNY or CUNY school, State University or City University of New York school. And my cousin was at Morehouse, and he came back and he would tell these stories about the parties and Freaknik, which is a Greek picnic down there, and all this kind of stuff. And it was just he was so descriptive, and he was so in love with the school that he kind of made me like, well, if I got to go, this is probably one of the better places that I could be. I didn't realize how competitive it was, and I didn't realize relatively how expensive it was. Like, now that I'm looking at colleges for my daughter, I realized it was a drop in the bucket. But we had a couple of lucky things that happened for us. My aunt lived in Harlem. She lived in Manhattan. And she was in the Honorable Charlie Rangel's district. God rest him, great man. And through some address manipulation and through some grants and stuff like that, we were able to, number one, get me in, and then number two, get it paid for. So it was it was a interesting road to it, but it wasn't a plan. I wasn't planning on college or whatever. I had no plan after high school. When the college counselors. I went to a Catholic high school, so Irish Christian brothers were not really pushing kids that looked like me. One thing that I probably should mention is I went to high school in New Rochelle. I didn't go to the high school in the Bronx. If I had gone to the high school closer to my house, I probably would have had actually more college orientation, college push, education push. But I went out of my neighborhood and went to a high school in New Rochelle, New York, where the emphasis wasn't getting minority kids to the next level. It was, for a lot of kids that were in my class at that school, this was the thing. So this was their college. They were going to leave there and then go to work. Right. Whereas for me, college was the next level. So had I gone where I was supposed to go, which was Spelman High School, Cardinal Spelman, not the college, I probably would have went to a city university, or I probably would have went somewhere else. But the fact that I didn't have any college counselor even putting college out there as an option, it was through family ties that got me to go there.
Interesting though, did you enjoy your Morehouse experience?
Absolutely.
Right.
It was absolutely the best time of my life, and I don't know if it's the butterfly effect or what it is, but everything that I do now, stems off of those 4 years. It's such a short period of time,
Yeah.
but my most intense relationships, the eventual path to meeting my wife, the travel that I do, the things that I believe, and the addition of how I conduct myself on top of what I was taught by my dad, that all comes from those 4 years.
So when you think about that, I love this entire concept. I think about this quite a bit. There was this kind of cheesy movie years ago called Serendipity. It's like a rom-com type of movie where, actually, a different movie, also a cheesy rom-com called Sliding Doors. Have you heard of this movie? Mm-hmm. It's a movie where a woman is running to catch a train and the door's shut right before she gets on the train, so she has to wait. And the whole movie is, what would her life be if she caught the train? And if she did, and because she didn't. And it shows the two different paths. And not that this was as inconsequential as a train, but if you didn't have this family member that kind of, helped you get to Morehouse, your whole life could have and would have been very, very different. Yeah. Not necessarily worse, could have been better, you never know. You have a great life. But I think about that a lot. And so what do you think that means for you as a dad, right? When you think about parenting and the guidance you give your kids, the very idea that Morehouse changed your entire trajectory of your life, going to school there, and how the decisions you make have far-reaching consequences. What is that? What lessons have you taught your kids?
It makes guiding my children through life excruciating. So I'm thinking that every decision, this could be it. I made a joke the other day when we were at the club. I said, you as a parent, you can do everything right. You get 18 years with your kids in the house before they're out, or 17 years before they're out in the college. You can do everything right, and then you put mayonnaise on a sandwich instead of mustard, and they're off on the wrong path.
Yeah.
It makes those decisions excruciating, but it kind of opens up the thought that this could be it. You know what I mean? The opportunities that my daughter, especially, my son, to an extent, but my daughter especially, the opportunities that she gets, for instance, being here in Singapore, my class trip when I was in high school was to Great Adventures, which is a second-rate theme park in the United States.
Right.
My daughter's class trip was China.
Right.
You know what I mean? The extent to the decisions that we made that got us here opened up a whole world of stuff to her. Now, who knows if that's going to be where her calling is, but we talk about all the time, my daughter is a citizen of the world, where I was just a citizen of the United States, actually probably just a citizen of the Bronx, and probably just a citizen of the Baychester area of the Bronx, right? My daughter, the whole world is open. I mean, she just got an acceptance from a university in Canada the other day amongst the schools that she's been accepted to already for the early admission stuff. I would have never thought about that. Right. I mean, even the movement that we did when we were back in the United States, my wife and I have been extremely transient. We followed the jobs.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought about going to school in California. I wouldn't have thought about going to school in Texas or stuff like that. So every decision that comes along, the decision that my wife had to come here was one of those moments where, what if when she got the information that this was available to her and that she could pursue it, what if she never came home and said, hey, I have this opportunity in Singapore, would you think about it? And as a matter of fact, she almost didn't. Wow. So that would have changed our entire life. We don't meet. I'm not doing a podcast in Singapore today because we did something else and we went down another path. So once I realized that every decision was that, then I kind of started to back off of it a little bit. But initially, excruciating, because, I mean, you don't want your daughter on the pole in clear heels. I mean, that might be a little too much for this podcast.
No, that is, I mean, it's fair. Right?
And you don't know what decision does it, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be that you ignored her or you didn't do this or you didn't do that. It could just be, like I said, I asked for mayonnaise and you put mustard, or, whatever. You don't know what decision it's going to be. But when you realize that it could be anything, then what can you do about it? You just do your best as you go along.
And you talked about sort of your natural disposition is to be cautious and to be glass half empty at times, and how
let good surprise you is my natural way. If it's going to be good, let that be a surprise. Don't be surprised by bad.
What is it? Prepare for the worst and hope for the best, or whatever it is.
Something along those
lines, right? But a big part of these conversations for me is reinvention, right? But you took chances so many times in your life, right? I mean, you went from what I would consider somewhat of an insular neighborhood. Everyone is very similar to yourself. You use the term groupthink, where everyone looked the same and you kind of did all the same things, to taking a chance going to Morehouse, far from home. Morehouse is in Atlanta, far from New York. You take this chance.
It's also in the South, which is probably a subject for another podcast as well. So
we can do that.
Very different.
I mean, there's probably, you're suddenly immersed in different socioeconomic groups, different. Yep. It is an HBCU, but still there's diversity within that, of course.
Different backgrounds, different kids.
Yeah, and then you start your career. We had talked about this prior to the recording here, but you started your career in special education. You end up pivoting later into sort of operations management and working on parking structures and all the operations that go with that. But then, and this is way later in life, but then your wife comes to you and says, hey, I have an opportunity. Your wife is very accomplished in the tech sector and gets a big opportunity to come to Singapore. This is on the other side of the world, Southeast Asia. It would mean you giving up your career. And you're not giving it up in your 20s, right? You're giving it up at a later part of your career. It's not easy to sort of pivot at that point. Tell me how you came to the conclusion that, yes, this is the move for us to do.
So, number one, I didn't know all that. If I did, I might not have done it. So okay. I did not understand the enormity of the task, and that kind of made it a little bit easier, number one. Number two, I had someone to follow on that journey, and I'll talk about him a little bit later. And then the third part was I have a very, very supportive marriage where, we're very open with opinions. We discuss things. We make team decisions. And I'll tell you why I'm here, why I'm in Singapore. My wife came home and she mentioned the Singapore opportunity as kind of like oh yeah, by the way, somebody at my job mentioned this thing at Singapore and in Singapore. And I was like, oh, what's up with that? What's going on there? And she's like, it's not something that you would be interested in doing. And I was like, oh, well, how do you know? We haven't even talked about it. She discussed it a little bit, and I saw that little gleam in her eye, and I saw that she was trying to downplay it or whatever. And I talked about this with my mother-in-law not too long ago. For the first time, I realized that there was a situation that was going on, an opportunity that my wife had, and she thought that I wouldn't support it. Mm. Like she thought that it was something that she couldn't even bring up.
Not just an opportunity she had, an opportunity she wanted.
Yeah, right. Okay. Right. And I have never felt that way about anything that's going on with my wife. I've always thought if something comes up and it pops and I bring it to her, she's going to give it a critical eye, but she's not going to hold me back from anything. And, to that point, we had done some other stuff. I mean, moved different places, following jobs and stuff. And I was like, man, what would make her think that she would have an opportunity that would be good for her, good for our family, but, something that she wants to do, and she wouldn't even bring it up, like she wouldn't even bring it to me. So it was kind of a prove her wrong situation, and I almost got into a mode where I was kind of a little bit talking her into it. Yeah. Like almost like, hey, you don't know what I would do. What do you mean? Don't tell me what I'll do and what I won't do. Yeah, I'll do it or whatever.
I think she worked some reverse psychology on
it. She could have. I didn't. She's smart enough to do it. She's smart enough to do it, so she might have. I didn't know how far away it was. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know what it was. So I thought Singapore was in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a city in China. Well, you can't say Hong Kong's part. Well, China, it is part of China now. Yeah. But I thought it was, and I didn't realize how far away it was. I didn't realize the enormity of the task. So I didn't realize how long we would be here. It was I can do anything for, we'll go there for a year. I can do anything for a year. But then we found out it was more of like a 3-year assignment or whatever. It's like, 3 years, I'll just come back. I might, we won't even sell a house. I'll just come back and get into the same thing. When it started to build into what it is now, so I don't want to take credit for, I knew I was going to move to Singapore. I knew I was going to give up my career. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know all of that stuff. Maybe I would have still done it, but I don't know.
Well, you did know you'd give up your career, though, because
I did know that it was going to be a pause in my career, but I did think that it would be easy enough to restart it. Okay. I didn't think 3 years tops. Right. That wasn't a giving up my career.
Okay.
7 years, that's giving up your career.
Right.
You got to start over after 7, especially at my age. Like if I was younger, I could probably jump back into it. And there's also stuff that I should have been doing while I was here to keep myself sharp and keep myself in the mix. That I didn't do that I probably would have done had I known that, I would have needed that in order to get back.
So I want to talk about the negative a little bit, because a lot of times in this podcast, but in general, taking big risks and leaps are always touted as like the cool thing to do. And
because you only talk to the winners, you don't talk to the losers.
Exactly. Yeah. And not to call you a loser, but you also have your views have evolved over your expat experience.
Absolutely.
You're in year 7 now. Tell me how you're feeling about being an expat today. That's different from when you got here.
Yeah. So when I got here, it was so shocking and so culturally different than anything that I had ever done, anything that I had ever experienced, that I didn't really have time to reflect on what it meant as far as career and life and all that kind of stuff. And then there was also COVID, which kind of muted it. So during COVID, it was, well, I'll be, if I was back in the United States, I'd still be in the same situation that I'm in here. So there really wasn't anything different about it. I'd still be stuck in the house. I hadn't gone back to the United States yet. I didn't realize that the U.S. was basically business as usual. So I thought then that, this is not too different. This is just a pause. This is whatever.
Right.
Looking back on it now, and I want to preface the comments that are coming up with, a lot of times we get opportunities for other people that are coming to Singapore, other people that are thinking about doing an expat type change. My wife gets these opportunities and she asks, hey, would you mind sitting down and talking to so-and-so? Would you mind if we had these people over so that we could talk about this or talk about that? And I always say no.
You always say no?
No, absolutely not. I always say no. And here's the reason why. This is an amazing experience. This is awesome. This is great. I don't want to step on somebody else's opportunity by holding it in a negative light when it was so great for me. The problem is that hindsight thing that we have as humans. I look at Singapore and my Singapore experience. So we talk about this all the time. I talk about the Burnetts that stayed in the United States and the Burnetts that came to Singapore. And now in my head, the Burnetts that stayed back in the United States are doing better than the Burnetts that are in Singapore. The Burnetts that are in Singapore are doing great. I've got a great life. We've, increased our overall wealth exponentially. My daughter has had amazing experiences. Singapore was a great place for her to be brought up. She's been here since the 6th grade. It's amazing. But I have that hindsight thing in the back of my head now that's like, yeah, it's nice, it's great, it's good, but I gave up better for that. And that might not be true, but it paints my experience as negative. And I don't want to stop, whether it's somebody that's watching your podcast or whether it's somebody that I talk to with my wife, I don't want to stop them from taking that chance and taking advantage of that opportunity, because this is amazing. It's just not for me. It just wasn't for me.
Well, I appreciate your candor, because it's okay. It's okay to say that. I mean, first of all, leaving everything you know and your country and your home and your friends.
You don't even know you love it until you get away from it, man. Like you don't even, just being able to, I mean, I'm a big guy, 6'4", 300 pounds. I can't walk into a store in Singapore and buy anything. I can't even buy sneakers. My daughter can't buy sneakers in Singapore. I didn't know that I would miss being able to walk into a store and buy something. I didn't know that I would miss stuff not closing. Now, this is probably something in the United States. It's probably different from region to region, but stuff don't close where I'm from. If I want something at 3 o'clock in the morning, I get in my car and I drive somewhere and I go get it. Here, that's not available. You know, there's after hours and that kind of stuff. The things that my wife and I talk about all the time, being able to do something is kind of what I miss about being home, not necessarily doing those things.
Right.
My wife loves Alvin Ailey. I can count on one hand, if I lost 3 fingers, how many times she's probably gone to Alvin Ailey. But now she can't go to Alvin Ailey, which is a dance theater, for people who don't know. Now she can't go, and that's different. You know, a lot of the things that I miss about being home, I probably wouldn't have done very regularly when I was there, but now I can't do that.
Now that you can't
and that's
do it.
a problem. And then also the career pause that we talk about, and now having to start over and do something completely different when I get back, that is challenging. It's a daunting thought. It is hard to think about. So that paints my experience here a little bit negatively. But, you know, it's easy to get to the end of something and then look back on all the challenges that you had with it. I've also had great experiences here. I've gone.
Right. You also have to calculate that in, right? Like
the
good and the ways it stretched you.
And because of my personality, I have to remind myself of that because I'm always thinking the negative part of it, and I forget about all the great things that have happened for us since we've been here.
Well, I want to ask you about the discomfort, right? And especially for men, okay? I know in modern times, sometimes it's hard to say, well, this is a male trait, this is a female trait, but men are raised to think of ourselves in a certain way, and I think society thinks of us in a certain way around sort of what we should and should not be doing with our time and our lives, right? But I don't know that sort of those views have caught up to what modern men and women can and do accomplish. And by that, I mean, you and I are very similar we have very similar positions. We have very highly accomplished wives in tech, which is a notoriously sort of competitive environment. It's full of very, very smart people, very accomplished people, very driven people. For both of us to trail, as they call it, trailing spouse, to trail our wives to another country, it really pushes your sense of, well, who are you and what are you? Or, well, let me ask you the question. I shouldn't say it does. Did you feel that sense of, well, what am I supposed to do? Or am I doing right by us as a family? Or
absolutely. Even absolutely, and even more so, we could argue the semantics of it. There are things in our society from the background that you and I have, which is a little bit similar, that men are supposed to be doing. In the current climate, you know, you can't say this out loud, you can't say that out loud, but the role of a trailing spouse is not something that men are supposed to do.
And there are very few of them.
Where I'm from, right, exactly, right?
And that's,
So, we can, that would be a whole nother podcast too, right? We could argue whether it should be like that, but I can say for me, it absolutely is. So that's part of, you kind of got to eat that if you want to be in this role, at least in the way that I'm experiencing it. And that has a lot to do with the situation because of Singapore and the laws here as far as visa applications and how you go about getting a job and getting sponsored and that kind of thing. Singapore shackles, because they have to protect their own people, right, as far as employment is concerned. So you're not going to follow your spouse here and get a job in a boutique on the weekends. That's not happening, right? Those jobs are taken and they're protected. Not saying that I would be looking for that anyway, but when you decide to come to Singapore as a trailer, there are certain things that you know that you're going to have to give up, except for in, you know, a very specific situation. I do know some couples that both people are working, but that's more of a rarity in my experience, at least at the groups that I'm in. So if you decide to come here as a trailing spouse, male, and you don't have employment already set up, you're not going to be working. And that is a big no-no in the community that I'm from. Men are supposed to work because of all the negative connotations that go with men that do not work. So
interesting.
When you get,
That's
you can be in a situation and try to explain it 6 ways from Sunday why you're not working, how it's more beneficial for your family, how you're building wealth or whatever. When you talk to people back home, they don't want to hear that. You're a black man. You're supposed to have a job. You're supposed to be working. Even if, so society has caught up to women like my wife who are just out there banging and getting it done.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like it was back in the day where you had to make more than your wife does, or there's still a little bit of that. But society has caught up to that part. They know that there's women out there that do their thing, right?
Yeah.
But what it hasn't caught up to, at least in my experience, is the male spouse being at home taking care of home stuff or taking care of kids, or in this case, we're in Singapore, you got a helper, you got this and that. You're not really doing much. You might be taking your kids to a couple of games or something like that, but that's not something that is considered okay, at least in the environment that I'm from. And it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow.
It's also hard to find a community, right? Because
there's nobody. There's nobody there.
There's no one there, right? So women that trail, it's much easier to find. I mean, there's
support for them. There's companies. The companies that men go to work for, that people go to work for here, have support groups that are set up for that because they don't want to lose the asset that they work so hard to get here. Right. So they support that, but not in the opposite. If it's a guy that's trailing, and maybe that might be warranted. I don't want to say that that is that's the wrong way to go about things just because I think it is and I'm experiencing it. Maybe that's just the way the world works, and maybe that's how it's supposed to work. Right. But it is very hard. Just answering the question of trailing spouse, it's very hard for a man, in my opinion.
Well, we didn't get to cover nearly as much as I would have loved to. This is the tip of the iceberg, so you'll have to come back and do another one. But Blaine, I like to do a quick lightning round at the end where we talk about a few different things. One is one song that you're loving at the moment.
So Busey Junction, I think, is the group, and Kokoroko is the song. It's like an acid fusion jazz type of thing. Okay. From the Bronx, but I'm not necessarily a hip-hop head. I like more jazz. My dad was very into jazz when I was growing up, so yeah.
What about one book that you recommend?
The Alchemist. That's it's kind of cliche. Right. It's one of the most read books in the world. I mean, it might be like number 6 on the list.
Great book.
But oh my God, the cyclical nature of it and how everything comes around. It's an amazing book, and it's like Animal Farm. You learn something new every time you read it.
And finally, if someone goes to New York City, where should they go get pizza?
So I haven't been there in a while, so it might not even be there. But for me, it's Nick's in the Bronx on Gun Hill Road. Okay. There's a bunch of places in Manhattan. There's a bunch of places in Brooklyn. Okay. So, but for me, it's Nick's. That's where I grew up. That's the pizza I grew up on, and that's what I'm used to.
My next New York trip, that's where I'm going.
There you go.
Blaine, thank you for being on What's the Scenario?
Thanks for having me, man.
This is really great.
I mean, it was great the last time you did it when it was just audio, but I mean, this is next level. This is really, really nice. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Take care.